Hi, my name is Noah Venable. This is my presentation for Fuse 102, The Masculine Dilemma, and this is titled The Media of Masculinity, Effective Disposition Theory, and Men's Mental Health. This will be focusing on the film All the Bright Places. So to begin, we're going to be discussing the general facts of All of the Bright Places, the film. This was directed by Brett Haley in 2020 and was released by Netflix. This is a Netflix original film, meaning you can only find it on their streaming platform, and it was produced by the company as well. This is based off of the novel by Jennifer Niven, which she wrote in 2016, or it was published in 2016. It is classified as a teen fiction. You can find it on Barnes & Noble, their website, and in store, and it is labeled as a New York Times bestseller. The setting of the book is in Indiana, and it follows two teenagers who are in high school. This being said, the book was written for people that are in high school or teenagers in high school. So it's written for those that are anywhere between the ages of 14 and 17, which gets really specific whenever we talk about the influences that the novel has as well. Now we are going to begin discussing the different characters within the film, as it really makes it the piece of media that reflects masculinity. First, we're going to be discussing Violet Markey, which is located on the left of the picture within the slide. She was regarded before the death of her sister as the girl everyone wanted to be, with a perfect life, perfect family, perfect location, perfect amounts of security. She had friends, she had everything that she could ever want. And then after the death of her sister, she began to become very depressed and suicidal, which caused her to self-isolate and self-loathe. And made her become very introverted. So it is because she experiences all of this bad mental health that she begins treating others with disrespect. She began to push everyone away, and just at that same time, she meets Theodore Finch, who is on the right of the picture, and I will get into his topic of conversation and the behaviors I witnessed from him later, as he's probably the most important character and the protagonist within this story. She meets Theodore Finch while becoming partners with him for a class project, and she begins to trust him and open up, and he eventually helps her progress through her mental health journey and find better mental health. So because of this, and because it was very obvious from the beginning, Theodore, his mental health was more concealed. So he was bullied heavily by his peers and often taunted by being called a freak. This meant that his childhood was extremely rough, and he suffered from really terrible mental health issues and a lot of suicidal or manic episodes. So because of that, and because these were unseen disorders and he didn't have a great social support system, he put in the most effort to make Violet feel more at peace with him, and she did not always reciprocate that as a friend. And because he helped her feel more at peace with her sister's death, he was falling into his own mental health struggles. He was extremely friendly towards others, even if behind closed doors he was feeling very suicidal and depressed. I think this is one thing that makes it very significant to the story, is that his masculinity and the perception of the help that he could gain from seeing a mental health provider or talking to a friend, it made him seem weak, and he didn't want to seem weak. So instead, he was being very supportive to somebody else at his own demise. So talking about Theodore now leads me into men's mental health, because inevitably he kills himself at the end of the movie without any warning to his friends and loved ones. And even though it was the intention of the filmmakers to highlight the importance of mental health care, they do not highlight the importance of acknowledging how the stigma around mental health care creates a poorer effect for men in society, which can be blamed on masculinity, because men don't want to feel weak or be perceived as weak because of this concept of masculinity, which then causes them to have poor mental health because of it. So according to a study done by J.L. Wang, the relationship between work and having major depression was elevated in men in comparison to women. This basically was all factors caused by work stressors, unemployment, high demand but low control in the workplace, and job insecurity was reported with higher stress, specifically in men, as well as having more difficult mental health disorders like anxiety and depression. It is also reported that men are more likely than women to work more than 40 hours per week and have less social support with higher physical exertion. So these are all major stressors within somebody's career, which then causes them to have more mental health struggles. And to see the comparison between men and women, it's important to note that men's mental health seems to be less societally supported, which is a big reason that this film highlights those negative aspects of masculinity, like Theodore hiding his own depression and suicidal thoughts. The graph that's located at the bottom of the screen basically describes, with percentages from research, how men versus women rate their stressors and their depression on a scale, and how those kind of the numbers compare, and how men, it seems to be a lot more extreme that certain things be stressors than others. The next point that I investigated within the struggles of men's mental health in media was how all of these negative side effects from stress and work and mental health come from a gendered societal view on depression and family roles. So to do this, I looked into a study by Katrina Loop. Parenthood stays central to a woman's life, was what she concluded, while providing becomes more important to a man in his life. So considering Loop's data, men's mental health only increases with work and age. So on this graph, this is using the Center for Epidemiological Studies depression scale. It shows how as men get older within a more steady job, their depression decreases. However, when it came to women's mental health, that changed and was dependent on the family's roles. So because it only improves with a job, but jobs are the greatest stressors in a man's life, it is very important to note that the mental health of men is impacted by this, and that societally it's not being supported. So to consider this in context with Theodore Finch, his negative aspects of toxic masculinity was that he never obtained help for the stress that he was feeling, and it's only increased on men. While Violet was getting better, he was only getting worse because he didn't talk about his emotions or his depression that he was facing with anybody. So the next and last point that I investigated with men's mental health was how men's physical and emotional connection seems to be influenced by physical signs of depression over mental. So this included heavy drinking and being less likely to visit the doctor as frequently as women. So this can conclude that men care less about their physical health and mental health, and this is due to the gender stigmas that are placed around receiving help. As we saw earlier, Theodore Finch was providing for Violet Markey, and thus he did not himself seek help. This also plays into the study I investigated, where men are more likely to view themselves as the provider and have more stress from work as well. The last thing I have to discuss in regards to the media of masculinity and Theodore Finch and All the Bright Places is the aspect of the affective disposition theory. I studied an analysis by Graff and Hustonix that compared the influence of a protagonist to the audience's engagement. In this case, this is the affective disposition theory that the audience is more likely to feel connected or transported to a story if the viewer feels more connected to the characters in the film. However, they specifically analyzed how it's proven to influence empathy and the behavior of the viewers. So, a character is more likely to impact the audience if the audience feels an emotional connection or engagement to their story, and it depends on the character's moral conduct how it aligns with the consumers. That's what really causes that influence. So, with that being said, Theodore Finch had both positive and negative aspects of masculinity and morality. So, it depends on how the viewer connects to the story, what they perceive him to be. Positive in the sense that he took care of other people, or negative in the aspect that he failed to take care of himself and ended up committing suicide in the end. With the affective disposition theory and the theories of men's mental health all in mind, I came to the conclusion that Theodore Finch showed both positive and negative masculinity, and in the end, the story is very applicable to the affective disposition theory and is very applicable to the influences in the future, being that how do we perceive men's mental health? Do we determine that the stigma doesn't matter? Or do we continue to apply the stigma to society because it furthers the economy or any aspects, such as how I talked about earlier with men's work? At the end, I will state my sources. There will be 10 seconds of them, and I appreciate you listening to my presentation.